us bread, but give us roses, bread and roses, roses, bread and roses.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to And Roses, a show about the intersections of creativity and social change. I'm Jordan, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by David Brown, an LA-based comedian and actor. He's a member of the Shrimp Boys comedy group, hosts a few ongoing comedy shows, including Haters Club and The Hilarious Test. You might recognize David from his breakout role as Todd, the transhumanist, in the show Jury Duty. David is also, like me, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, where we spent a lot of time working together a few years ago. So today we're going to be talking about David's journey to finding a foothold in the industry, the difficulty of being involved in activism while also having a career in hobbies, and a whole lot more. David, how are you doing today?
Jordan, hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. Actually, before we get into this, if you would permit me a minute, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who is watching and listening and who has been for the last few weeks. This show has been it's an experiment, try to kind of weave some threads between the world of entertainment, creativity, and also the world of political organizing, trying to bring about social change. It's been really fun, and I have a few more episodes planned that I think you all are going to really like, and then I'm going to take a break. I would like to keep this show going. It is a lot of work, and I still have a full-time job, so it's been interesting to try to navigate that. Maybe one day I'll have a Patreon, bring even more bonus content, and somehow make a living off of this. That day is not today. What I will say is that if you've been enjoying this, if you would like to see more, hear more, please, subscribe, follow, and tell people about it. Share about the show on social media. Okay, that's the end of the plug. David, do you co-sign?
I'll have to really think about it, but I've just done so, and I've come to the decision that yes, I co-sign this statement. I'm so glad you're doing this podcast. I think it's great. It's lovely to have an excuse to look at your face, Jordan, and to have seen some of my favorite faces of people from our shared past gracing the screen. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you. Well, so David actually has gotten to see my face more than anybody else. This is the second time that we're recording together. David is truly the greatest. Was one of the first people I talked to about this show. Kind of shared the vision. He was excited about it, and I was like, "Are you down to record?" And he was like, "Yes." And then I was like, "Are you down to, if I feel like we could do it better, then re-record?" And he said yes. And yeah, we recorded. It was pretty good, but I, felt like there's room for improvement, some more stuff that we didn't quite get into. And on this episode that you're listening to right now or watching on YouTube, we're gonna get into this stuff.
No mistakes on
where
this
we
one.
should start.
It's gonna be perfect.
David, you were, when I was telling my sister about the show and people who I thought I might be able to get on, the name that sparked joy in her eyes was when I told her that David, who is Todd from Jury Duty, was maybe going to be on the show. I love the show. Many people love the show. Tell us a little bit about Jury Duty.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, Jury Duty is a TV show that is actually weirdly complicated to explain. The simplest way to say it is basically that we did the Truman Show to someone, but in real life, in the setting of a fake trial where this guy, Ronald, took part in what he thought was a documentary about a real sort of banal trial, like a lawsuit that was just going to be like a documentary on PBS or something like that. But that, unbeknownst to him, everybody involved in the show was an actor except for him. And so then we subjected him to our various japes as we acted weird around him. He was very nice to us, and then we told him about it at the end. And you'll have to see how he takes it.
Yeah, no spoilers. Honestly, if you haven't watched it, you should go watch it. If you had, so glad you're here. David, a pretty cool opportunity for you when it came up. It was kind of like one of the biggest things that you'd been able to do. How did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, definitely. It was like by far the biggest thing that I had done. In the past, I've been mostly like a live sketch and improv comedian, kind of in like the alt world. I started doing stuff in Chicago before moving to LA. And then yeah, have been like auditioning for TV stuff over the years, feeling like it was getting some traction here or there, but ultimately never like booking anything. And then Jury Duty was the first TV show that I like booked a part on, and it was just like another audition that came into my inbox. They're mostly all like things you tape at home, like a self-tape audition. Jury Duty was different because instead of reading lines, I got to do like improv based off of prompts that they sent. And then, yeah, it all went from there. And it was immediately from the jump of getting to audition and getting to improvise, even those like rough first like minute long, iterations of like what the show would eventually become. It was so much fun. So yeah, really, really glad to have had the chance to do it.
For for you, this being kind of like a big break type moment, I think you were working, you had a job before then, and this was, not something that you would be able to like just do part time. How was that for you, like personally? Because I mean, you were like working mega overtime to actually pull this off for a few weeks, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was like I said, first time that I've ever like gotten a job on like a TV show. I'd done like some small parts in like indie like movies in Chicago, but it would be like, one day show up for a little chunk of time, say a few things and go home. So this one was the first time that I gotten like a job where it would be full time. And yeah, on Jury Duty specifically, because of the nature of the show, basically it never stopped. Like, we would wake up in the morning and I lived next to this guy that I had to pretend that I was someone else to all day long. And then we spent all day together and then like went to sleep in adjoining rooms yet again. So yeah, it was very,
And how
it would have been
long did
hard
it
for it to be
last?
more full time than that. It lasted, I want to say like a week and a half, 2 weeks maybe of
Okay.
doing that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did
I
it?
should know, but yeah.
Oh, I feel like it must have just been a blur. Did it take
Yeah.
a mental toll on you having to be just so in? Did you lose yourself in the character of Todd?
Yeah, I'm still there. No, I think the hard thing about doing like filmed stuff a lot of the time is the kind of like start and stop nature of it. That you like, you do a take, they yell cut, and then they make an adjustment or get a different angle, and then you go again. And it's kind of hard to like keep a thing going, especially when you're used to doing like more kind of like loose improv comedy. So the really nice thing about the show was that it just never stopped. It's like you could really get into a groove, and that feeling was yeah like the best that I've ever had doing like any sort of performance thing. It just like you could plant like the seed of an idea and then return to it like days later, give it a little bit of water, and then like see it grow into this thing where it's like you could really feel like I don't know. I felt very like proud of a lot of these like little moments that were like sort of organically like woven into the show. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and since filming, or I remember when it first came out, there was, a lot of press and a lot of people were, there's a lot of, controversy. I don't know how much it was like controversy. There was a lot of discourse about, the sort of the ethics of like doing this to a guy. And I think
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of attempts were made to just kind of get ahead of that and even put him out there because he was ultimately a good sport. And, he talked about like, oh yeah, James Marsden, who is a member of the cast. James has been so great. He's been, keeping in touch with me. I'm curious, have you like been in touch with Ronald like since this ended?
Yeah, definitely. It's like everyone in the cast is on pretty like casual like speaking terms, I would say. Ronald lives in LA now. I like see him sometimes. He came to my show that I did last night. And yeah, it's
Cool.
like everyone in the cast is like pretty we all see each other with like yeah, like a pretty good deal of regularity, I would say. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, just gotta
Yeah.
work on getting James Marsden to hook you guys up with more cash directly. I'm sure he can afford it, or
Sure.
maybe go
Some of those
speak to
sonic
his
rings,
agent,
maybe.
hook you up, or maybe
Yeah.
some of those sonic rings. Yeah, I know that's
Yeah.
what just before we started recording, you were saying that you really wished that you could have some more sonic rings from the movie Sonic the Hedgehog,
They look so
but
nice, just sort of
Ja-
floating in the air up there. Yeah.
yeah, James is too stingy though.
Yeah. So it's regrettable.
Uh, it's a weird thing, right? Where you make a show And then it's like by the time it comes out and anybody actually sees it, it's like, months and months later, a year later even. And here we are having this conversation even like a year after that. And it's like, not to be rude at all, but it's like, hey, this is this really great thing that you did. And for you, it's like so long ago.
Yeah.
Tell me
Yeah.
a little bit, like how does that feel? Like how has your life like sort of changed since doing the show? Has it been in ways that you sort of expected, or where have been, I don't know, some like disconnects between expectation and reality?
That's it. It's an interesting question. It's been like, I would say, a roller coaster a bit as far as expectations and reactions to the show. I was thrilled to get the job in the first place. But then I think it was such a sort of absurd thing, like doing it. I think we all felt like it was a really fun thing to film while we were doing it. We all felt really like proud of the process and of having taken pretty good care of this guy, all things considered. But still, it was like, what is this? How will anyone ever like be like directed to this show in any way that's like so difficult to like understand what it is? And then I think like from the end of filming, I think a lot of us were like, maybe it will just like never see the light of day, and if it does, like it will be a thing that like a few people see as sort of like a weird curiosity on this like subset of the Amazon website that like we'll have to sort of like look over someone's shoulder to like direct them to or whatever.
Freevee,
So
who knew what Freevee was?
it didn't exist at the time that we were filming the show. It was still IMDb TV at that time, and then it got
Which doesn't
rebranded in
necessarily
between.
like sound promising.
No, yeah, already didn't sound promising, and then we're like, heard the name Freebie, and we're like, yeah, probably no one is ever gonna see this. And then when they like showed us the show before it came out, I think we were all like excited. Like it seemed like kind of the best version of what we could have hoped for it being. Then it came out to kind of like mixed reviews, I would say, like in the like press reviews for the show. And then I think when we had the premiere, I think those had come out, and we were all sort of there's a muted kind of like nature to like seeing the premiere all together. And then via like the show getting shared on social media, like TikTok in particular, it kind of like found an audience. And then that, I think, in turn caused there to be this like critical reappraisal of it kind of like as it was coming out. And then it kind of like crested in popularity, I would say, like right as the strikes started. So it was a weird moment of like not saying anything about the show, and also like a huge dearth of work in the time that we were all like on the picket lines. But yeah, I'd say like all things considered, as it was with filming the show, I think the reaction to the show has also been like about as good as anyone could have ever hoped for, and I'm like really grateful that people watch the show.
Yeah, you mentioned TikTok was especially big. They're like Todd fan cams out there.
Yeah, it seems like statistically there's maybe like one probably. I couldn't tell you, but
You never had
it
anybody
seems
send you
possible.
like, you gotta see this. Look what they've done, and it's just you with like some like K-pop song playing.
Not as of yet. If you wanted to get on that, I know you have some video editing skills maybe, but no, people like my cousins would send me like people like dressed as Todd for Halloween. It was sort of like a surreal thing for me. Yeah, that was a weird one.
Cool. But yeah, the timing is so weird because it's, it comes out, it is actually really well received. People are talking about it, and then there's a strike. And the maybe like opportunities that you'd been hoping that this could lead to, where are they? How did that go? How have you been processing things since then?
Yeah, it's been strange. Once again, it's like I think we all got very lucky to get this thing out and be able to kind of like do some degree of like promoting the show, like it's all here for you to watch, kind of like right as the bell rang, so to speak. And then I think that organically, without like a press or anything, people were watching the show still, which was very nice. But yeah, I think pivoting maybe to like talking about like a bigger thing in Hollywood, I think the drawdown of like work and production that has been like much commented on since then was already starting by the time that Jury Duty was coming out. Like the negotiations between the WGA and the AMPTP were already happening, and we're sort of like, there were sort of already leaks of people being like, it's not going so well, like as the show was coming out. Some people that had like been working like more than I had, were like, it seems like there's going to be a strike again. So there's already this sort of like cloud hanging over it, along with this kind of like contraction already beginning that, depending on the narrative that you choose to buy into, I definitely think that there was sort of a management lean into the skid of saying like, trying to shift some blame to like to labor for an overextension and a poorly thought out business model. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we're kind of talking a little bit about history at this point, but that wasn't necessarily the truth. What was really going on from your point of view as somebody who's working in the industry, knows a lot of people in the industry? Why did it come to a strike last year? Why were things already deteriorating?
I think it is like it is kind of like multi-pronged, and there's like interesting facets, especially around the like AI aspects of the negotiations. But I think uh, that kind of like complication was leaned into as a way of sort of like obfuscating the core story, which was that um, there was kind of like there was cheap money available for a long time that allowed companies to make a lot of money with like Wall Street investment on the expectation that they would run all sorts of different companies like Silicon Valley startups. I think like Netflix being like the key example in Hollywood, but that would not be sustainable ultimately for like most platforms to keep like churning out all of this content to try to get people to turn on these subscription services all the time. And I think they just like reached the point of like overextension of trying to opt into that model at what seemed like a golden period for like workers in entertainment, but which has now like led to this contraction in a lot of production, like moving away from like labor protected like work. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's, David, you probably or maybe read this, but really fantastic article by Danny Besner in Harper's, their May issue, that was called The Life and Death of Hollywood. Maybe if I remember, we'll drop a link in the description for this, because it's a really fantastic look at just sort of like the history of how, once upon a time, just like being a writer in Hollywood used to be like not like a guaranteed route. There's still, competitive, but a way for people to be able to make a comfortable middle class living. And that reality is just like not with us anymore. And he really unpacks some of the like, economic, like material reasons why that's unfolded in the way it has. For you, David, though, personally, like, how have you kind of mentally coped with, going through, a moment in history like this? You're still here. You're still working. You're still trying to get more work. Yeah. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, it's a weird one because I got really lucky, I would say, like as it came to like um a show that I think has like led me to be able to get more work as an actor than, like I said, I had never like worked before really. I'd like comedy and acting had always been like, even to call it like a side job is like a stretch, is like basically making like no money doing it for, I don't know, like close to a decade before like getting this job. And then that jury duty has been like a springboard to other work, puts me in like a tiny subset of actors, most of whom like don't get things like that ever. But for actors, and definitely more so for writers, being able to string together even just like smaller like parts and things like that to make it like a part-time job as a baseline, to be able to get like health insurance or other sort of like basic guarantees for life has been like the key to Los Angeles like existing as what it has been for like a century. So yeah, it's weird to be living through a period where maybe that's like fundamentally changing. I'm not sure yet, but also to be like on the lucky side of it so far, where like I've still been able to get like some work. Like I've never had like a particular dream to be like famous or anything, but just to be able to say like acting is like my like only thing that I have to do for work. I don't have to do anything else, has like been my dream since I was like a kid. And I, knock on wood, but like right now I'm like living that, and it's like a dream come true, even as I'm seeing this like contraction, and a lot of my friends are hurting a lot. So yeah, it's a weird moment.
Yeah. Well, let's get a little bit biographical. Let's see, because yeah, you've been dreaming about doing the sort of thing that you've begun to be able to do for a really long time. Where are you from, David? Where did that dream come from?
Yes, where do we all go back to? I was born in Boise, Idaho, the potato place. My no one else in my family really did like entertainment-y stuff at all. Like my extended family, my mom's a teacher, and my dad worked at Hewlett Packard, the like printer company. He
Does he
just retired
still
recently, I
work
think.
there?
My mom's going to.
Oh, okay, that's
No,
good
he retired. Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're on the BDS
Some of those.
boycott list.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that's why he retired, but maybe we could craft that narrative.
Many other actors come out of Boise.
Not so many. Aaron Paul, I think who else? Christina Hendricks, I want to say. And then David
Wow.
Lynch grew up for a while in Mountain Home, I think, which is like an Air Force base just outside of Boise.
Okay.
There's others, but those are
So
the ones
there,
that always like pop into my head right away.
yeah, there's some examples of people to inspire you in your journey.
Sure, but not really an entertainment capital. Yeah, yeah.
No, not so much. So growing up there, you had this dream of, kind of pursuing acting as a career. Are there any sort of like opportunities for you to begin flexing that muscle? Did you star in school plays?
In elementary school, I like a guy named Stitch Marker that worked at my elementary school was like, I think I'm not sure what his job was, but I feel like maybe like he helped with like special ed kids. It was his like part-time job, and in the summer he was like an actor at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival that was in Boise, and he kind of like helped my class put on like a Shakespeare play when I was in fifth grade, and that I played Nick Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And that was really like I like got the bug, I was like, this is like the thing that like makes so much sense to me. I'm having so much fun. It feels like I'm like more like deeply myself than I am like in any other context. And yeah, I was like, I want to like figure out how to do this the rest of the time. I had the expectation that that wouldn't be possible, but sort of like kept kind of like hoping against hope that there would be a way for it to work. So yeah, kind of like so far so good. We'll see. We'll see if I have to go back to Boise at some point. But yeah,
You kind of owe it all to Stitch Marker. Great
yeah,
name.
great name. He's an amazing guy. He told me that he used to work on a farm and he got struck by lightning twice while he was working on the farm.
Oh, wow. Most people have never even been struck once.
I know. Can you imagine being so lucky?
No, I can't. Never in my days.
And
You never necessarily conceived that it could be possible, but I mean, you did eventually, right? You left Boise. You went to school in Chicago.
hmm
And
yeah,
was that kind of
I went
conceived
to
as like a step in pursuing that dream, or was it just kind of I got to go to college?
yeah. I think it was I had the idea of like I went to Northwestern in Chicago. I just sort of like applied like on a whim because two actors at the Idaho Shakespeare Festival had gone there. So I had a context for like these like actors that I just like knew personally had gone there, and I was like, that seems cool. Didn't really like know anything more about it than that. Um, and then going there, sort of learned that it's sort of like a school that like a lot of like people do go to for like the film and theater program. Not as like well known as like other famous ones like NYU or whatever, but yeah, it was like thrilled to be there and be like, yeah, like meet other people that were, I thought, like really talented and great. And the school is right now in the middle of a lawsuit where it's alleged that they conspired with other private schools to suppress student aid. So we'll see how
Oh,
that goes.
okay, great. Do you stand to, is it like a class action lawsuit? Is there maybe a
It
payout in your
is.
future?
I got an email about it. We'll see. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. It was at that school because I think that's also where you met a few of the folks that you started working with and ended up kind of moving out to LA with the Health Trap Nightmare crew. Who's Health Trap Nightmare and how did you come to start working with those guys?
Who is Hell Trap Nightmare? Primarily, I would say it's Sarah Squirm, aka Sarah Sherman, who is now on Saturday Night Live, but yeah, who I met at Northwestern along with my friends Scott Eggleston and Wyatt Fair, who were also in the group. Everyone else in the group is a year older than me, so they had all like graduated and moved into Chicago and started doing the show together. I did some stand up on it. I guess I should say first that the way that it came together was that Sarah texted a few people and said, "What if there was something called Hell Trap Nightmare?" And that was the only context that we got. We didn't really know if that was just like a place or a drawing or whatever it would be. But yeah, it ended up, yeah, still could be any of these things, I guess. But in its first iteration, at least, it was like a show. I did stand up on it there. Luke Taylor, who had like gone to school at Oberlin and then moved to Chicago, like got on board in that time, and then I graduated and sort of like rudderlessly and afraid for my life and the future sort of like clung to these people until they like let me do stuff with them, and then yeah, it became like a show that we did in Chicago. It's like a variety show. Sarah would host it. We would do like sketch comedy on it, and then there'd be like usually like a noise or a metal musical act at the end.
Cool. Well, what eventually brought you all out to LA? Oh,
We would tour sometimes, and we would do shows mostly like driving around in like a van in like the Midwest and the East Coast, but we would sometimes like fly out to do shows in LA. I think I'm trying to remember how the connection actually happened, but like some people like connected Sarah with Absolutely, the like Tim and Eric like production company, and then they worked with Sarah to make an infomercial, which like an Adult Swim infomercial, which I don't even know
cool.
if they still do those or if Adult Swim is doing much of any sort of like live action stuff these days. But yeah, that was very like exciting for all of us at the time that like we all did like bit parts in it, and Sarah got to sort of do her signature screaming and pouring goo on things and flaying flesh off of bodies. And I think that that sort of signaled to her that there was maybe like a possibility that we could like move and try to like turn Helltrap into like a TV show or something. So we all moved, and then instead of that happening, we moved at the end of 2019, and then COVID happened instead.
Great timing. A good
Yeah,
time to be like pulling up your life, your roots, and going somewhere brand new. Um,
100%.
how did that work out for you all? Did you land with your feet under you at all despite the global pandemic, or were you just in crisis mode?
Definitely landed. It would have been hard to land with like my feet less under me. I think I had very little money at the time that we moved, and I was sort of like worried about that. Felt depressed all the time being here and not knowing like what to do or where to go. It was really hot, and my car was weird, and then it was like I felt like things were sort of like just starting to like get like together, like cobble together what felt like a workable kind of like work life balance right as everything was shutting down. So then I like, yeah, had this like temp job that I had been doing, started like continued to do that during the pandemic. I was working at a glass factory, but doing like data entry. And I was still like going to that job during the pandemic with like they gave me like a piece of paper to keep in my car because there was this like moment when they were afraid that the police were going to like stop people and be like, "Are you an essential worker or not?" So I had like a branded piece
Yeah.
of paper in my car that said, "I'm an essential worker. I have to go to the factory." So yeah,
That's so
those
funny.
were
I
good
love that
days.
it's
Yeah,
like it's a factory. You're just this poor little factory worker. Actually, that was real. I mean, obviously, the essential workers like yourself kept things running. So maybe I shouldn't laugh too much.
I think definitely pots and pans clanging for the essential workers. I think to have put myself in that category definitely was a bit of a stretch. I don't think that the data entry that I was doing for like different kinds of like glass banisters to be like on this website qualified as like work that was like essential to the economy, but the company disagreed, I guess.
Yeah. Well, maybe just in the interest of time, just to sort of jump things back to the present era, because yeah, obviously, I mean
Mm,
that's just like very difficult circumstances to live through, but you kind of just kept your head down. You've continued to work on building relationships and just showing up, being a part of the industry, and it's eventually, led you to this place where you're feeling more comfort than you certainly were then. I think yeah, maybe there's a lot of people who are listening to this who have some interest in whether it's comedy or like any other industry. Not that you're, an expert by now, but are there any like lessons that, even if they were just personal lessons for you, that you feel like you've learned along the way that have kind of helped pave the way for you to be able to get into the positions that you're in right now?
Yeah, I think it's like for a lot of like acting and comedy stuff, it's the key I think is just to like stick with it. It's like you don't really like know what the path will look like that will land you somewhere. And just by sort of like sticking around is like the best way to get it to like work. I felt like really discouraged like right before booking jury duty. Like Sarah had just, I was like, didn't like know what sort of like I felt very like baseless as far as like what how to like find a like path forward. And it was like coincidence that it like came at that moment to be able to do this. But yeah, if I like hadn't submitted the audition, obviously like wouldn't be it, it wouldn't have happened. So I think just sort of like being around is a big part of it. And while being around, definitely it was like palatable because I was like doing something really fun with my friends the whole time. Oftentimes driving a weird van around weird places in the Midwest and like sleeping in weird smelling and looking places. But it was so much fun to get to do those shows, like making each other like laugh and having fun and figuring out new ways to make videos weird. So I think some combo of like love of the game and just sticking it out is the best advice I can give, I guess. Yeah.
Are you a nepo baby, David? Some
Mm.
some people would say that, it's like the opportunities are, it seems like, not just some people would say, it seems like the opportunities are like only there for like nepo babies.
In that my mom was a school teacher and I started doing plays in elementary school, I think there's that dimension of nepotism. I think that I already had this bias to buy into the public education system that then allowed me to do plays for the first time. Beyond that, not really scoring too many of these nepo points, but hoping to, if any sort of like long lost relatives of mine, own entertainment companies, let me know or whatever
And me, let me know too. I don't know. Do
in
you
the
feel like you
comments.
see that dynamic, the nepo baby dynamic, like impacting your industry too much? Do you feel like there's jobs that you feel like you wish you could have gotten, but they're going to a nepo baby?
It's another tough one because it's like I think it's definitely real that obviously like in it's most visible in entertainment probably because like fame as a commodity is such a big part of it. But I think it's true in everything. It's just like people that have like existing inert connections and like grow up within something have like an easier time than getting entree into that thing as they're trying to get started. But I feel like looking at the results, it's also like you kind of don't. I don't know. I don't mind like when the person is good. Like I never mind seeing like a Skarsgård in anything or whatever, because I'm like oh, they have the same last name, but they're all quite good at what they do, I think. But yeah, I think to some extent it's also like a bit of a trick in that it's like the whole thing is held out as this thing of like you have to be so special to get this like one opportunity that's being like dangled in front of you, which I think is a dynamic that exists to make us like want to eat each other when actually you can just sort of like make cool stuff with your friends and not have to like worry about, whether someone is going to like put a smiley face or a frowny face next to your name. And I think like if the work is good, I think like it's worth doing, and hopefully the business doesn't weed out all the people that can see the good stuff and give it a chance to like to
Hmm.
thrive and get money.
Yeah. Is there anything else that like bums you out about the industry in its present moment? I mean, obviously it's just kind of like hard all around, but or I guess maybe speaking specifically to like comedy, is there anything about the like I don't know, the scene that like gets under your skin or the habits or cultural things that you wish could change?
What bums me out about comedy? It's in comedy and in like entertainment in general, it's such a strange moment where I think like there's so much stuff being generated. There's so few barriers to entry as it comes to like making a finished product. It's like as easy as it's ever been to make something and to get it seen by like at least some other people that you can like just send like a link to. I think it's strange to be at this point that there is so much stuff out there, but seemingly so little money available to make it into things that allow people to like eat on the basis of making that stuff. I don't really begrudge anyone their particular thing that they're trying to do. Um, hmm. That's not even necessarily true. There's plenty of people who I begrudge the thing that they're trying to do. I think there's just like a lot of things that are made for like entertainment purposes that I think prop of like taking advantage of other people, which I don't love because it's just like a reproduction of other systems that like take advantage of people all day long.
I mean, like
It-
like
yeah, as it
monetarily, or just sort of like humor, punching down type stuff.
Yeah, I think all sorts of things like the same impulse I think that like will make you like sort of like prank someone in like a mall or something and sort of like make fun of their reaction it's the same dynamic that also like makes people like who owned means of production like then pay people like such a small portion of the value that they generate, which may like maybe ironic for me to say as having been on like a prank show, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of like mean spirited stuff out there that feels edgy, but is really just like reproducing kind of like existing bad power structures. I don't love that.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's talk about power structures and the things
Mm.
people are doing to try to upend them. Because yeah, you and I met in is it like the very end of 2020? When
Yeah,
yeah,
I think so.
I was involved with DSA. You were involved with DSA, and the thing that you were doing at the time that kind of put you on my radar was you were helping to produce a lot of these like comedy fundraiser shows. Tell me a little bit about like that era, how those things came about. Had you been doing like IRL fundraiser shows before, before COVID started, or did this kind of just like spur something for you guys?
I'm trying to remember the chronology of things. I mean, we started doing the Hell Trap Nightmare shows in 2016, I think. Like, kind of the moment that the show started corresponded to, like, for me, definitely, I don't know, like, if you had to like put a timestamp on some sort of like political awakening, I think that definitely was like, as for a lot of people, was like a wake up call to kind of like the facts as they stood in the world politically, and like drove a lot of people to think that there was like an imperative to try to change things. And I think an attendant realization that didn't start in 2016, et cetera, et cetera. But so like when Hell Trap started, I feel like we would oftentimes have people like table for things at shows. I feel like DSA and maybe like DSA endorsed candidates in Chicago. Sometimes I feel like we would do some live fundraiser stuff too. I think maybe we did a fundraiser for Nithya. I think a live one maybe before the lockdown started. So, but
Mm.
yeah, here and there we're doing those pre-pandemic, and then
Back in
during the pandemic.
2016, sorry if I may,
Oh no, yeah.
in 2016, so that was sort of a moment of like political awakening for you. But I think it certainly was for a lot of people. I feel like it was one of those moments that just like drove a lot of people to action and or drove a lot of people crazy in a lot of different ways. And I mean, obviously for many people and probably a lot of people listening to this, like that was a moment where it was like, okay, the status quo is not good enough. We need something new. Democratic socialism seems appealing. That's what Bernie was talking about. But there
Mm.
were also like a lot of, younger people who were like really upset about Trump, but kind of only went as far as just the like, resist Russia gate, really just like becoming like MSNBC hawks. What was it about? It was 2016 or 2017, like that, was that when you like joined DSA? And yeah, for you, like why that direction?
I think like the bullet points I guess would be that like growing up, Idaho is a very like red state, and I think I got a lot of joy out of being kind of like contrary to that. I feel like I have a kind of like contrarian bent, and then it's sort of like you start with that vibe, and then people offer you facts conveniently as they see that you're sort of like amenable to them. So I think a lot of stuff about the post 9/11 world, I kind of like grew up in like having opted into an environment that was very like critical of like American empire and like ending and suspension of rights that like we thought like wouldn't be taken away or whatever. And then I feel like the sort of like coup de grace was the 2008 recession. And but I think at the time I put a lot of hope and faith that like a Democrat would like a Democratic president who sort of like promised a lot of like change would bring that. I was so excited for Obama to get elected. And then I kind of like just didn't think about politics that much. I remember when the sort of like revelation about the like drone warfare that the Obama administration had ordered like an airstrike on like a U.S. citizen, being these like moments where I was like, oh, I don't know, something seems off, and you know. But then I think it was like 2016. That just to say that like I had this sort of like build up maybe of like crumbs already, so that when there was this kind of come to Jesus moment in the form of Trump's election, that I just like had fortunately like had this experience already to say it is just so obviously like a lot deeper than just like one or two elections, but hadn't really like wanted to like commit to anything. And I think I joined DSA after Charlottesville. I think that just felt like such an extreme and like violent, literally like life or death, like articulation of like the what was at stake. That was like the moment when I was like, I should do something. Yeah.
Isn't it just like absolutely absurd that I'm just thinking back to Charlottesville and just these like shocking images of these, like literally like neo-Nazi dudes marching with the tiki torches, chanting "Jews will not replace us," and that's like the movement that Trump brought into office with him. It is just shocking to like compare, like what actually happened not that long ago in this country versus what is being portrayed as a threat in the form of people saying slogans like "from the river to the sea," as that being like the true, terrifying thing.
I love this podcast, Know Your Enemy. And they just did an episode where they interviewed this guy, David Austin Walsh, about this book that he wrote about kind of like more of kind of like the like conservative, like cultural kind of like movement operating kind of like just outside of the mainstream. And kind of, I haven't read the book yet, but in the interview, he talks about like, it's like really like Herculean task basically undertaken by people like William F. Buckley to launder these views, to launder be like the work of like making conservatism like seem like a viable and reasonable option is never ending. And it's really just sort of like it's constantly kind of like laundering and tailoring things to make them appear like coherent, and relying on kind of like a short memory to do so. And that the actual like consistent, like philosophically internally consistent work of the right is it just is like evil, exclusionary, racist, anti-Semitic, but that it will like launder itself in whatever way it needs to make it not seem like that. And
yeah, I mean it's that's like the entire last half century, or probably much longer, but of the Republican Party is just trying to find sort of these like wedge issues to build themselves like a base. And if nothing else, like they're very good at playing to that lowest common denominator and finding these I guess using communications and using like propaganda to motivate people to then enact stuff like voter suppression and packing courts with their people, which is terrible. I feel like the left could always continue to do a better job at cohering communications, being more effective with communication strategies. And actually, like that era when I first met you and you were doing these COVID era fundraisers it was very chaotic in so many ways, but I had so much respect for the way that you all were actually bringing on like semi-famous people into these spaces, leftist, socialist kind of fundraiser shows to just like perform, to be funny, but then to also like talk about issues. That's something that's kind of has, I think, in a lot of DSA spaces has sort of like faded in the last few years, and I'd love to see more of that. But yeah, how do you feel like it went when you were doing that, especially in those like pandemic days? Do you feel like you were sort of like successfully able to, I don't know, raise the money, spread the messages that you were hoping to spread?
Yeah, I feel happy about the work that we were doing then. I think certainly like kind of like I obviously understand the sort of like the issues with this sort of like, we get everyone together to save the swimming pool, like the public pool or whatever kind of like mentality being like, well, yeah, obviously that's not going to be like a solution to every problem and etc. But I do think that I feel happy about what we did also because I think that it mirrored a thing that I think is successful in like other sort of organizing work, in that it's like power mapping to figure out like where money and attention and effort and getting like eyeballs on something can be effective at these like specific choke points, not just to sort of like nebulously like raise money or raise awareness for like sort of like broadly defined like a banner thing, but to like try to get like a person elected to
Hmm.
local council, try to say like, well, do this show where we're sort of like kind of like highlighting the people that like did the most like phone calls for this like phone banking effort or whatever, more kind of like like mundane, like less highlighted like areas of work that wind up
Yeah.
being like more useful, particularly in LA where there is this like we have so few like elected officials representing so many people, that to be able to like work on a few kind of like lower visibility campaigns, you can get like a lot more done.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I actually I think a little bit before this episode with you is coming out, either like a week or two before, I'll have this episode coming out with Lupe Blancas, who is a student organizer at Cal State U Northridge. People will have
Okay.
heard that by now. I
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the conversation that we had, and we just kind of talked about her work and just the sort of like frustration of people being like, oh, thank you for your work, saying that to like activists and organizers, when it's really like, no, but we're just kind of talking about the challenges of like getting people to do things. And we talked about that a
Mm.
lot, but one of the things, and this is on me, I was sort of kicking myself a little bit after that interview because I felt like we didn't really dig in that much into like what are the like tactics that are effective. Like it's yeah, one thing to say like you need to do something, but it's like a whole nother level, and this is where the wisdom and experience of like organizing comes in, is just as you were talking about, is like, well, so do something, but do what? Like, because just doing something is not guaranteed to mean anything. There was
Mm.
like, I remember in 2020 there was this organization here in LA, or I say organization, I think it was like a Twitter account here in LA that just posted a like Black Lives Matter bail fund. They just like started a GoFundMe, Black Lives Matter bail fund, and they raised in like days or a couple weeks like $2.5 million or something absurd like that. They were not attached to any organization. Any
Right.
organizations that were like putting people up in harm's way, like were already connected with people that had a bail fund. So they were sitting on
Right.
like these like $2.5 million. They found like good things to do with the money, but just this idea of like, oh yeah, this issue is going on, find some way to give. It's like like find some way to give, find some way to give your time, but you need to find some way to do that effectively.
Mm.
One final thing I wanted to say kind of about these comedy shows. I mean, because I think it's just a really fantastic example of like using creative skills and talents to sort of meet the moment. There are lots of things that people need to do that are just like boring behind the scenes, like administration, organizing spreadsheets, setting up a event page for a meeting, setting up chairs or, welcome tables at the meeting. People need to do all that sort of stuff. But there is still room, and for like using creative gifts and talents to actually like productively support a movement. And then the final thing that I wanted to say is that like when I first, started working with you, you were probably making some appearances on the shows, but you were also like the person who was like producing those shows. You were just like the one behind the camera in the studio telling people when their time was coming up, making sure that the titles looked right, the graphics were good, that the connection to YouTube was set. And yeah, I just have like so much respect for, you're somebody who obviously had these kind of creative ambitions, but being willing to put, let somebody else be on camera and do the work off camera. Yeah, I admired that a lot.
Oh, thanks. Well, likewise to you. I feel like, yeah, we did a lot of that work together in DSA context too. Yeah, I think it's this maybe also ties into just like kind of like working in entertainment right now is like increasingly there's pressure to be a lot more your own producer, which it stems from an unfortunate place, which is that there's just sort of like a cost cutting thing from a lot of like companies, and sort of like anything that anyone can get you to do yourself, put work in yourself that they don't have to do, they will do. But the like downstream benefit from that can be that like by necessity people trying to work in entertainment increasingly like just have to know how to do every aspect of it, just sort of like how I kind of like got to, I didn't really like know anything about like video editing or camera work like when I started like working in like odd jobs in those fields, and just like tried to figure it out to do like dumb sketch comedy videos like with friends. And then it turns out that it is a useful skill to apply to a lot of things as people are trying to support an organizing effort with like during a pandemic, like with a web stream show or whatever. So yeah, I think it's just like, yeah, everyone has stuff that they can contribute, it turns out. And the more stuff, becomes stuff that you can use to try to make the world more as you would like it to be.
Yeah, we've been going for a while. There was one final topic that I was kind of looking forward to having the chance to talk about, but let me know honestly if you need to go.
Nothing but time.
Okay, cool. So I've really been wanting to have this conversation since I've been working on this show. I feel like you are the person that I'm talking to in this first season that I can get into this a little bit. Because I want to talk about like, yeah, intersections of creativity and social change. Lots of people doing cool creative stuff. Lots of people, have been involved in some kind of like movement or organizing spaces, and even have other guests that are like DSA members. You were somebody who like, yeah, really were doing these fundraisers sort of supporting DSA in LA. And then I kind of like heard about you doing this, and I was like, this guy is somebody that I really we need help, because we were switching to Zoom. And I sort of like pulled you more into the world of like DSA internal organizing for a good like year or so. And we did some like cool stuff. You were like absolutely crucial in helping us. We were just doing our like chapter meetings, but they're on Zoom. The other thing is that despite, some like good work, some genuinely good work and some cool projects that were being done during that time, like I remember there was the project, the stimulus solidarity, where we were asking people to like donate their, stimulus checks to be redistributed to like undocumented immigrants. I mean, that was fantastic. But it also coincided with this era where a ton of people were getting involved with DSA. A lot of people were really passionate about the injustice of the world. And a lot of people had a lot of different ideas about like what we should be doing. And so we're not even meeting in person. Nobody's really like getting to know each other. We're just like going on these Zoom meetings, or we have like a Slack or a discussion board. And it slowly just like blossomed over this time. I mean, there's always been kind of conflicts, but it just felt like it was this period of like people at each other's throats constantly. And for me, a lot of the people who are kind of like players in this on like different sides or having different points of view were folks that I'd had the benefit of like, getting to meet and get to know, before we shifted to totally online in that year. But you were just sort of like coming in, hoping to help. And I fear kind of just seeing like a total mess. I've been wanting to ask you for like years how you like were processing that during that time, and if that was something that kind of like was challenging for you to deal with, and challenging sort of your faith in this like Democratic Socialist movement that you've signed up for.
Huh. Yeah, maybe my faith was challenged, I guess. I think it's it's so understandable though, and I think it was obviously very difficult to, you know, intellectually, I don't think that anybody actually thought this, but there's just a thing that happens when you're like interacting with people online in any context and don't interact with them in real life, which is that they just don't seem as real. And I think that the tenor and the tone of that it just changes when you're interacting with people where the interactions don't seem as real, and coupled with this like urgency around like this like very real like urge to make the world different, like right now, which is an urge I think that we all feel. I think it's like why we're all doing the work. But I think then that urgency coupled with like people I think probably like getting involved in stuff for the first time, like being inundated with all sorts of like information on Twitter, the internet, et cetera, all day, seeing sort of like world-ending like images all the time, all contributed to an environment that made it very hard to do work together. I
Yeah.
think I like about DSA is that it's like explicitly multi-tendency, so you can have people with very like passionate disagreements working together on things and trying to organize to get their specific thing done the way that they want it to because they believe it's the best way to go. And yet like sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. The group decides to like put resources towards one thing or another. And I think I suppose like the flicker of faith that I had that sort of survived in that was that we like you and I both had jobs that were very like kind of like boring procedurally, like just trying to like sort of make meetings function, like allow people to like talk via the like like sort of dusty Robert's Rules of Order or whatever. But then like in another context, the reward part of it is that you like get to go out like with someone that you don't know that well and knock on doors and canvass for a candidate or something, and then you can like hang out after. And because it was
Yeah.
just these moments where it's like say why you don't like what this person is talking about, and that's your human interaction for this like day, maybe it's like that's pretty tough.
Yeah. The, it's all like I feel like yeah, it's sort of in hindsight it is like okay, yeah, we're still here. That organization DSA still there. It's I think actually just tonight as we're recording this, some pretty cool news in Atlanta DSA. They just got a member elected to like the state legislature for the first time ever,
Oh,
defeating
awesome, that's
like
cool.
a 7 year incumbent that had been endorsed by like all of the powers that be. So it's like,
All
yeah,
right.
things, it's like, okay, the org didn't completely fall apart, but
Yeah.
like I will say like a lot of people who got involved like several years ago are like kind of nowhere to be seen, and I don't think that that's necessarily like the healthiest thing, and I don't think that that's just because like they weren't strong enough, they couldn't cut it. I think that's something that always there needs to be like a reckoning with. But it's like you're here who's someone like yeah you actually got like really busy and started like booking this stuff after we were like working together, and I think also maybe wanted to take a step back. But yeah, how did you sort of like process, did you have a moment where you were like I'm just gonna I for now I just need to be totally done with this?
Yeah, I think there was like I basically stopped doing that kind of like admin work right as the organization was like going back to like hybrid in-person meetings. So it's sort of like I feel like I kind of missed out on getting to do a lot of stuff with people more. But yeah, I've still like done stuff like DSA stuff. I like a lot of the like Starbucks organizing and stuff have like gone the line with some like
Cool.
people still, some like phone call stuff, some like electoral stuff. But yeah, I think my story probably like mirrors a lot of people's in that there was this period of time where I really had a lot of free time and like not a lot else that I could do. And I felt really good to like devote that time to organizing, and I just don't have that time anymore. But I think the elastic for me like did like snap a lot in the other direction, and I'm hoping to find ways to do more work again in like a little way. I think it's just like that snap is like a thing that happens. You hear about it like happening in like organizing a lot, but
Mhm.
I think it was probably like as acute as it could be for people that were like suddenly it was like all, you know, politics, all DSA like 24/7 to then like, you know, being like, oh, that was weird. You know, I'm just
Yeah.
don't have to do the like Slack thing anymore. Now I have my regular life back or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like that's just one of the great challenges of like anybody who's trying to figure out how to make the world a better place. I feel like yeah, there are so many of us who have just lost faith that like the wonks and the power brokers are gonna just work things out amongst themselves to our benefit. And like the only way that things are actually ever going to change for the better is through some kind of like mass movement. I mean, certainly it's like to change things for the better will require at least like the consent of hundreds of millions of Americans. Some like tiny little fraction of people is not going to just like force their will on everybody else unless those people are people that are oligarchs and billionaires, the ruling class. But yeah, a small group, the working class, certainly isn't going to do it. So it's like we need to get a ton of people involved. But yeah, how do we actually do that? How do we create like movement spaces and opportunities for people to participate in ways that is like doable for people who like also have personal creative dreams or even just responsibilities, families? I don't have that answer to that question yet, but it's something that I'm working on.
What if I did? That'd be wild, huh? I
Do
obviously have
you?
no idea either, but yeah, I draw a lot of like I draw like comfort and inspiration from like I said, like Idaho, very red state, very like anti-labor, anti kind of anything that you'd basically want. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, the state part of the Obamacare law was that like states could like opt into an expansion of Medicare that was, I think, like sponsored by the federal government. Like there was like not really any reason for states not to do it. I'm oversimplifying it, but still a lot of like conservative states in the sort of like legacy of like wanting to restrict access to more healthcare,
Mhm.
like opted out and or had like a lever that it would be like it would have to be like brought electorally. And there was this like grassroots movement in Idaho, a state that you'd look at and think that there'd be no way that it would go for like an expansion of public access to healthcare, and like people like drove around and got signatures and got it on the ballot, and it passed. And I draw a lot of inspiration from just like knowing that that is an option. I actually don't. It's maybe worth checking if I know it was like challenged in court a lot in the state, but I think it, as far as I know, it is still the law of the land. I'm looking at it
Yeah,
right
and
now.
I think about the examples of like, I don't know, Florida passing like an increase in the minimum wage at the same time they elected some like, deeply regressive conservative senator or something like that. Or
Right. I said Medicare exchange. I meant Medicaid. Yeah, but yeah.
hmm. Yeah, if we can break through the noise of, conservatism or, neoliberalism, just passivism and individualism, people can still be reasonable. And like the better future that we're dreaming of is like a reasonable future. It's not just like an idealistic pie in the sky one. It's just one that where the laws actually make sense for people. And yes, sure, that means that like the folks who have enjoyed living, high on the hog are maybe going to have to come down a little bit or a lot. But for the vast majority of people, yeah, we're trying to build a better, a more beautiful world. And well, David, I think we're a little bit over time, but I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jordan. It's gonna be hard to if you wanted to chop it up. It's like dark now, so yeah, you'll kind of have to, I guess.
It was kind of
Uh,
nice actually seeing the sort of gradual the fade for those on audio only. There's been a gradual fade of the sun in David's uh, window. David, you
and
got
everywhere,
any
I
any
understand.
plugs? How can people find you? How can people follow you? When can they come
Mm,
see you at a comedy show in LA?
I'm directing my friend Kyle Mizono's show. It's called Adaptation. It's an adaptation of the movie Adaptation. And you can see that at the Lyric Hyperion on May 30th. And then if you are in a Palm Springs sort of mood, I'm in a short film that's going to be at the Palm Springs Film Festival called Holiday House, written and directed by my friend Alex Heller. I acted in it and also edited it. Anna Sophia Robb is also in it. And it's a weird movie about miniatures. Other than
Fantastic.
that, I'm around,
Yeah, you're around. Follow David for the latest. David Schedule on Instagram and Twitter.
And X, yes.
X, yeah, my bad. Yeah, follow David, everybody, and follow And Roses. Please subscribe to this show. Please like, comment. David, thanks so much for coming on And Roses. Loved having you.
I love being here. Thanks, Jordan.